All right, our Daf Yomi today is sponsored by Michael and Aviva Recht. B'zchus Refuah Shema for Ephraim Ben Shifra. Thank you so much to them. And we are going to start, overlap a bit from yesterday, 5 lines up from the bottom, the 2 dots. We were up to the part where we're discussing how many judges we need for the case of Motzi Shemra. The case of Motzi Shemra is in Sefer Devarim, Perek Chaf Beis. It tells us the story of a man. He gets married, he doesn't like his wife, and then decides that he's going to make a claim that she was not a virgin, she was not a basula at the time they got married. So if his claim is correct, and we presume, as we said last time, we're going to presume that he has a migo, that he has there's a rational explanation to presume that he is correct, because why would he get married and pay for the wedding celebration and everything only to be able to complain that he doesn't like her and then not have to pay a ksuba? It sounds like he's paying more than he's receiving. So he has the right to make that claim, and if he's correct, so then he can divorce her and not have to pay a ksuba. If he is lying, and the father can prove that he is lying, so then he's going to have to pay 100 zuz, and he's not allowed to divorce her. And third scenario is if he makes a claim that she is not a basula, and together with that claim, he's claiming that she had relations with another man after their erusin took place. So now she was mezana. She had relations after she was an arusa, after she was an engaged woman, and so she would be chayav misa for that. So in order for her to get misa, in order for her to get the death penalty of skila, so he's going to have to prove that occurred, right? And then he would need witnesses and warning and all of the associated parts that come with it. Good morning. Okay, so we're going to just quickly review. I don't have to worry if the screen dims, right?
No, I think so.
Good. We're recording on a different method for those at home wondering why I'm talking about the camera. But okay, I think once the light is on, it's still going. So the question is like this. We had an argument between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. Rabbi Meir said that 3 judges were necessary. The Chachamim said 23 judges. Why? Because we might wind up with a scenario where this could lead to a death penalty. If the husband is coming and making his claim that he wants to divorce her and he does not want to have to pay the ksuba, the possibility exists that he will be right, and then it could lead to her being proven to be an adulteress and having to pay. So the question is, who cares? So there's dini nefashos. It's possible for it to get to be a dini nefashos. Who cares? Amar Ula, so Ula explains, this was the one that we went over, the choshishin lalaz kamiflagi, the argument is whether or not we are concerned and worried about once the word of this court case gets out, so then will others come and testify? The husband originally goes to the court and just makes a claim. He says that she's not a basula, and I want to get divorced and not pay the ksuba. The question is, once people hear about this, is somebody from around town going to hear about this and say, oh, well, we know more about that case, and we want to show up, and we'd like to testify that, in fact, we know that she was an adulteress. Okay, so Rabbi Meir Savar, Ein Choshishin Lalaz. Potentially, we're going to have, like I said, 8 different potential reasons why the Rabbi Meir would hold only you need is 3 judges, and why the Chachamim are going to say you're going to need 23. So Rabbi Meir says you're going to need only 3. Why? Because we're not worried about such a thing. That's unlikely to occur, and since it's unlikely to occur, so therefore we can start the case with 3 judges, right? If it turns out somebody does show up, I guess we restart the case and have 23 judges, but we don't have to start all cases of Motzi Shemra with 23 judges. For Rabbanan Savri, the Rabbanan disagree. They say Choshishin Lalaz, that we should be worried about that, and therefore we may as well start the case with 23 judges. That's the first answer. That's what Ula says. Rava Amar, no. Kuli Yama Lalaz Lo Chashina. Nobody worries about extra witnesses coming. If the husband starts the case and he's got no witnesses, we can presume that this is not a death sentence case. Well, if that's the question, so therefore the argument here is, well, why would we need 23 judges? The answer is because we are arguing in the question of whether you have to show honor to the original judges, right? So what's going on here? Kegon de iknif be esrin utlasa. So for example, they gather together. The husband made a claim. He says, I know that she committed adultery. And I have witnesses to prove it. That's his claim, right? So he's actually including the claim that he's going to gather witnesses. But then he shows up to court and he's got no witnesses. Now, they gathered 23 judges based on the presumption that he was going to come with his witnesses. Now they realize he's got no witnesses. So the question is, do you dismiss 20 judges, let them go home? Or do you say, well, once you've got the court together, this is now the court. This is the court for this case. So therefore, as far as honoring the members of the court, once you're in the court, once you've been invited to serve, we're going to finish the court case with all 23 members. That's the question. Lemedin din. So what's going on here? They gathered together 23 judges in order to make a judgment regarding what they thought was going to be a capital case. Ve'ibdur v'amar lehu dainu li miha dini mamnis. Turns out he says, well, the judges scattered around. They left. They said, well, there's no case here. There's no death penalty here. And the guy says, well, wait a second. Before you go, at least I want to be able to get a judgment on my monetary case. So therefore, is that going to be? Can we please do my judgment? And the question is, do we keep all 23 judges for that monetary judgment or not? Okay, so now Meisve, we're going to ask a question on Ula's explanation. Ula was the first explanation. He said that the issue is whether we're worried about additional witnesses that might come. So Meisve, when the Chacham said, Tav mamon bishlosha, if the husband's original claim, what his claim was originally was a financial claim, bishlosha, then all you need is 3 judges, right? Because he made his claim. He said there's not going to be any. We're not going to make any claim here for. Looking around where the Gemara went. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm not sure. So tavu nefashos be'esim v'shosha. But if they made a claim, if his claim is that he's going to do a capital case, so then he needs 23 judges. So bishlama tavu mamon techila bishlosha. So I understand, it makes sense. If his first original claim was it's going to be a financial case, okay? So then they're going to set up with 3. Tavu nefashos tchila, if his original case was capital, so afilu mamon, even if it turns out that it's going to be financial, be'esrim v'shlosha, then he's going to wind up with 23 judges. Ela le'ula kasha, but ula is going to be a problem. Because ula, under what circumstances, if we're not worried about laws, and the fellow came along and he only made a claim that it was going to be financial, under what circumstances are the Chachamim coming with 23 judges in that circumstance?
It never said it, never capped it at 3. It said you need 3 judges.
Well, that would mean that...
right?
You're right. What we had sort of explained it ourselves was that I guess they would have to stop the court case, reconvene, start over, but that sounds cumbersome. Why not just convene with the 23, I guess, if there's a possibility? I mean, the whole point is that there's no possibility, so it's a questionable circumstance. When would you ever wind up? I guess the issue is, why would you would not convene with 23 in the first place?
No, but
right?
Yeah.
So the answer is Ula Zakasha. So Amar Rava says, Aniva Arisha Bechabura Targima. So me and the lion in our group, we explained this. We explained according to Ula. Umanu, and who was it? It was Rav Chia Bar Abin. It was Rav Chia Bar Abin, who was called the lion in the group because he was extremely wise. And he had said the following: what's going on? Shehevi Abal Edim Shazinsa. So what happened was, the case is as follows. The husband comes along and he's got his witnesses. That's why the case started with 23. Right? We're trying to figure out why did the case start with 23 if he was only claiming money. And we're not worried about people coming from off the street. The answer is, well, he started the claim, the husband started the claim with saying that it's a case with witnesses. Behavior of Adim, and then the father brought his own witnesses, Vehezimum, Le'ede Habal. And he made the husband's witnesses into scheming witnesses. Now, we have to talk for a second about what happens with the halachos of scheming witnesses. So Edim Zomamim are unlike, we have 2 different types of ways to prove witnesses false in a court case. We have Edi Sheker, false witnesses, and then we have Edim Zomamim. Zomamim are scheming witnesses. So Edi Sheker just means that we prove that what it is that these folks are saying is false. If we prove that they're false in some sort of a way, we have Edi HaKosha, we can have witnesses that contradict, or we can investigate these witnesses and then they contradict each other. So those witnesses simply fall off. They're considered false. Potentially they've done a Aveira, but if they do an Aveira, they're not going to get Malchus. We're going to describe why. They're not going to get lashes, and we'll describe why later on. But when it comes to Edom Zomim, we have a special halacha. Vasisim lo kasher zamam lasos. The pasuk says that you do to your scheming witnesses whatever it was that they had intended to, whatever punishment it was that they intended to cause to the defendant. That's the punishment that they get. But it's only under specific circumstances. In order to become an eid zomim, the witnesses have to testify. The new witness has to testify that these witnesses could not have testified about what they are claiming because they were not there at that time. They were with us at that time, and so that's why we ask all witnesses what the location was that the event occurred and what time the event occurred. Because if other witnesses can come and testify that these witnesses were not there, they were with us at the time, they become Edom Zomimim. And so that's the circumstance that happens here. The husband comes along with his witnesses. The father comes along and he's got witnesses that say, your witnesses are invalid because they were with us at that time. So now, Bo ligvos mamon mibal, now the father comes along and he's got a couple of court cases he can deal with. When he says, okay, now that the husband is proved false, so then I'm going to collect money from the husband. Well, wait a second, did we say the husband gets believed? Because, well, the answer is we believe the husband when there's no witnesses at all involved. We believe the husband, because why would he pay for the wedding ceremony and do all of this work if he was really lying and knew that she was somebody who he didn't want to marry in the first place? Why would he go through with this? It makes no sense. So therefore, we're going to presume that he's telling the truth, that he liked her, that he went through, and then he was surprised as everybody to find out that she was not a basula. That's the logic there. However, once he's coming with witnesses and he's making the whole claim and his witnesses are false, the husband loses all credibility at that point. So now, if the husband comes with his witnesses, the father comes back with his witnesses of contradiction. So now the father can come and claim she was a basula the whole time, and he's going to win the court case. So he's coming to claim from the husband. So he's going to come bishlosha. He's going to come with three judges because he's suing the husband for his 100 zuz.
No,
right?
It's not a new case because the other case is
that case is done. That was the husband's case. Right. The husband's case is done, right? Ubemakom nefashos be'esrim v'shlosha. Now the case against the witnesses, right, that they were Edom Zomimim, that is a case of Misa. So that is right, the Mishnah's case, which is talking about he's claiming that she was committed adultery and she's going to lose her ksuba. So even that case, right, even though the husband's going to start off and saying it's only 3, we're going to have 23 judges. Even though it's only Mamonis, he's going to say that that's going to be with 23 judges.
Continues the case.
Right.
But I just understand, the husband is not Aman just from the get-go? Just because we assume because that's he paid for the wedding?
As we always started off with the presumption that if the husband comes and makes this claim, he has a believability.
So why would he even bring witnesses at that point?
It's a great question. The only reason to bring witnesses is in order to prove that she was an adulteress and to kill her. He does not need to, right? So he's bringing it in order to be able to make an extra proof to make it a capital case.
Oh, okay.
So are we saying that we start out this case with 3 judges?
So we're going to say now. So what we're back to is, according to Ula, we're going to start off even in a momentous case, even in a monetary case where the husband is making his claim. We're going to start with 23, because we said, well, wait a second. What if it does turn into a dina nefashos case? You're right. What is the case that we talked about that was only a financial case that you only need 3 judges? That's the countersuit. That's when the father comes back to the husband and says, hey, you lied, so now you owe me 100 zuz. That's the circumstance. There's no misa potential in that case, right? The father is just claiming, you lied, so now you owe me 100 zuz. That's the case that only requires 3 judges.
So the case that the father has, he would have 2 cases here, right? One against the...
It sounds like the case against the Edom Zom is probably going to be tied together with the original case that the husband brings, right? He comes to be able to get her, right? And then once the Edom Zomim come, the Beis Din could pronounce in that court case with those original 23 judges that the Edom are Zomim and they get killed.
So the father's case against the husband is a separate case.
Correct.
From the one with the Edom Zomim.
That's correct, and that's why that one only requires 3. Okay? So now let's go on and try to give a bunch of other different answers. Now, the general theme of the answers is to try to figure out why it is that Rabbi Meir holds that this case isn't going to turn into a capital case, and why the Chum hold it can turn into a capital case. Okay, that's what's critical to understanding the next bunch of cases. Is they're all going to follow the same theme. Essentially, Rabbi Meir holds that the case that's unfolding before us is not going to turn into a capital case. It can't. And the Chacham are going to say, no, that could be a capital case. So here's an example. Abaye says, the Kuli Alma Chayshinan Lulaz. Right? First of all, when the court case starts, we are worried that new witnesses could come. The husband's not coming with witnesses, but new witnesses could come. Umishum kivodan shel rishonim. And now that we're going to start with 23 judges, even when we come with a financial case, we're still going to judge it with 23 judges. Right? As we said, according to Rava's answer. So what's the difference of opinion why one would say it's going to be only 3 judges and one's going to say 23? Kigon de osru bastam. The answer is that there were witnesses. Right? Now, when we say chush and lalaz, we're worried that new witnesses might come. That only happens if the husband shows up and he doesn't have any witnesses. But if the husband does have witnesses, okay, so then we're not concerned that brand new outside witnesses are going to come besides the one the husband has. We're going to assume he searched around, he found the witnesses. So now he comes to court and he's got witnesses. But these witnesses come in and they ask the witnesses, well, what happened when she was becoming an adulteress? So they said, well, we just gave her a warning. We gave her a warning. We didn't tell her that if she commits adultery, that she's going to get stoned, she's going to get skila. We simply told her that she would get misa, she would die. Well, that's what we call asr bastam. That's a plain warning. And it's an argument in the Gemara, in other places, whether such a warning is considered a valid warning or not. So, v'hai tanahu, it's based on the following argument. Ditanya, as we learn in a brisa. Ushar kol chayve miso shebatorah, ein mamisin osam, ela be'eda ve'edim v'hasra. All death sentences that are written in the Torah, you need to have a testimony, you need to have witnesses, and you need to have a valid warning. And v'ad sheyodi'uhu shu chayav misa bebeistin, you have to be able to say, you're going to be liable to the particular type of death sentence that you'd be liable in that court. So therefore, and Rabbi Yehuda goes on and says, Ad sheyodi'uhu be'ezeh misahu nerag, that it has to be, now the Tanakama says, you just have to tell the person, the warning has to be, you will get a death sentence in court. Rabbi Yehuda says, it has to be, you will get skila. So now that's the argument. These witnesses come in and they say, well, we warned her that she would get a death penalty, but they never told her it was going to be stoning. Therefore, according to Rabbi Meir, he says, okay, then that's not going to be a death sentence, because he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. He says, you have to tell her that it's going to be skila, otherwise it's not death penalty. Well, then what's going to happen? The witnesses are going to be believed. The husband's going to be able to get divorced. He's not going to have to pay a ksuba, but she's not getting a death penalty because she never received a technically valid warning.
So it's only a monetary case.
It's only a monetary case, right? Whereas the Reb Chachamim are going to hold like the Tanakama and say, what are you talking about? As long as you said that she's going to get a death penalty, and even if they didn't tell her which one, that is considered a valid warning, and she could get a death penalty, better gather 23 judges. Okay, that's one. Next, Rav Papa says, another potential answer. Hacha be'isha chavera askinan. We're dealing with a Torah scholar woman. The woman is a Torah scholar. And the kamifagi bepugta de Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda v'Rabbanan. And what we're dealing with here is the old argument between Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda and the rabbis. The Tanya, as we learn in a brisa. Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda says, Chaver ein tzarich hasra. The question is, what is the purpose of a warning? When witnesses come upon a person doing a avera that they're going to get a death sentence for, what's the purpose of the warning? So there's 2 different ways to look at it. Purpose of the warning number 1 is potentially the person doesn't know that what they're doing is that bad. So therefore you need witnesses to warn and say, hey, what you're doing is really bad, you could get a death sentence for it. Okay, that's great. The other way to look at it is, regardless, sometimes you know it's the wrong thing, but you need a witness to remind you, right? Hey, I'm here to remind you that's a really bad thing and you can get the death penalty. And then maybe now that you know that there are witnesses and you actually could get a death penalty, maybe it'll stop. Right? There's 2 different ways to look at it. The difference of position is, what if the person is a Torah scholar? Well, if he's a Torah scholar, he doesn't need anybody to remind him that this is prohibited. This woman is a Torah scholar. She knows perfectly well that adultery is prohibited in the Torah. She knows perfectly well that the punishment for it is skila. She doesn't need a warning to remind her of that. The only reason she might need a warning is because she is engaged in an avera, and it would be a good thing for the witnesses to remind her to stop her. But now that all depends whether this warning is necessary. Now, what happened is these witnesses did not warn her. So now the question is, did she need a warning or didn't she need a warning? According to the opinion that says that you don't have to warn somebody's a Torah scholar, she didn't need a warning, so she can get the death sentence. Therefore, this is a capital punishment case. You better get your 23 judges out.
But we said there are two reasons. The first reason that makes sense. The second reason
so according to the second reason is that
she needed to be reminded. She was struggling at that point.
That's correct. So she needs to be reminded. According to that,
Right.
even if she's a
hasra,
chaveira,
for sure.
she needs a hasra, and therefore the fact that she didn't get a warning, means she can't get a death penalty. In which case, Rabbi Meir says, get 3 judges out. That's all you need, right? And that's what Rabbi Yehuda is going to say. According to this opinion, right, the only reason why she would need to get a hasra is in order to make sure that she is not doing this through negligence, meaning through a lack of knowledge. Maybe she's not aware that what she's doing is prohibited, right? So if that's all it is, so then she is very much aware that it's prohibited. So therefore, she doesn't need a warning, and therefore the Chachamim are saying, you better get your 23 judges together. This woman, being so knowledgeable, can get a death sentence. Whereas, according to the other side, it says it's not relevant how much she knows. It's relevant that she's engaged in an Aveira, and she needs to be reminded. And so therefore, if you didn't, she doesn't get the death sentence. That's what Rabbi Meir holds. That's why there's only 3 judges. Okay, good answer too. Next, Rav Ashi Amar. Rav Ashi explains, Kegon do Asru Bei Malkus, Velo Asru Bei Katola. What happens is, they gave her a warning that if you do this, if you commit this adultery, you're going to get lashes. They didn't say that she was going to get a death penalty. Now, the argument that's outstanding is, they're arguing in the argument between Rabbi Yishmael and the rabbis. Ditnan, as we learned in the Mishnah. Makos bishlosha. So, Mishum Rabbi Yishmael Amru be'esrim ushlosha. The question is, how many judges do you need in order to judge a case where the person is going to get corporal punishment, right? If he's going to get lashes. So, what's happening here is, we're all going to agree, according to the opinion that says, that if somebody was supposed to get a death sentence, and the witnesses messed up, and the witnesses said, oh, you'll get lashes. So, when they go to court, they're only going to get lashes. They're not going to get the death sentence. But they are going to get the lashes. They're not going to get nothing, because they were warned that they're going to get lashes. So they're going to get lashes. Now the question is, how many judges do you need in order to give somebody lashes? According to the first opinion, all you need is 3 judges. Says Rabbi Meir says, there's no death sentence here. The worst thing that could happen is lashes. You can give lashes with 3 people, right? Says the Chachamim, no, they agree with Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael says, even if it's going to be a lashes case, you're going to need 23 judges for lashes. And since you're going to need 23 judges for lashes, you better get your court case together with 23 judges. Also good, right? Simple enough. We're going through, these are pretty quick because essentially it's the same formula. How is it that the case can come out to a death sentence or a case that requires 23? And Rabbi Meir holds the case can never come out to a case of requiring 23.
These are academic questions, right?
Yes, all academic. There's no practical individual circumstance.
Based on real.
Correct. This is not case law, right? This is a theoretical, right? All of these are theoretical arguments. And by the way, these are a gathering. This is a great little Gemara here because this is a gathering of Gemaras all over the next several prakim and into Makos, where we argue on each one of these points and bring out the actual cases of each of these points. But here we're just illustrating the fact that how many judges you need or what kind of warning is valid and what kind of warning is not valid is exactly the point to determine whether a case is a capital case or whether it's simply a monetary case. Ravina's got another one. Let's say one of the witnesses turns out to be a relative or turns out to be invalid. They're arguing in the old argument between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi. Aliba de Rabbi Akiva, according to Rabbi Akiva. Okay, so let's hear the case. Ditnan, we learned in the Mishnah. Rabbi Akiva says, Lo bashlishi elul hachmir alav, lasos dino kayotzi ba'elu. If, let's say, instead of having, all I need is 2 witnesses in order to prove something, right? I don't need a 3rd witness. Let's say, though, the group that comes into court is a group of 3. So the pasuk, the Torah tells us, al pishnaim o shlosha yakum davar. Based on 2 witnesses or 3, we can validate a case. We can prove a case to be factual. The Gemara always wants to know, well, what's the reason why you need the 3rd? If I can prove it with 2. Obviously, 3 is even better. So the third one's going to be fine. Why do I need the third? So Rabbi Akiva explains, and he says like this. The reason why is, remember we discussed this circumstance of Edom Zomimim, that they're scheming witnesses. Well, what if I've got a group of 3, right? So, and they're all found to be Zomimim. Well, can the third guy say, well, what does this have to do with me? Even if I never showed up, these 2 witnesses would have proven that this guy gets the death penalty. So kill those 2, let me go. The answer, Rabbi Akiva says, is no. Once you're part of the group, you're part of the group. All 3 of you are part of this group. So therefore, that this third group is lo ba el lahachmir. It's not lo ba hashlishi el lahachmir alav. Lasos dino kayotze be'elu. This third guy gets the same consequence as the first 2. Even though the third guy would claim, my testimony was unnecessary. You could have killed a guy with 2 witnesses. Since you came as part of that group, so then you, first of all, we're going to also learn that Edom Zomim don't become Zomim until you can invalidate all 3, right? You have to invalidate the entire group. But once you invalidate the entire group, all 3 get the punishment, not just 2 of them. That's what Rabbi Akiva says. Im Kain, if that's true, the pasuk, the Mishnah says, Ana shakosov es hanitfa over avera. So the Mishnah says there's actually a nice little piece of musar, a nice kernel of wisdom that you could take out from this. The Torah is telling us, if you are not the main guy involved in avera, but you're the side guy involved in avera, the Torah is considering you like the main guy. Don't ever say, I'm standing on the side. It wasn't really me. I'm not that right. But this happens a lot of times in bullying situations with kids in school, where one guy is calling another kid a name, and some other kids are standing on the side, and they're watching the whole thing, and they don't say anything, right? So the strategy, that's actually, it is a strategy that we teach teachers, even not in Jewish schools, but those bystanders are critical to stopping the bullying situation. If those bystanders would say, hey, stop calling that kid names, the bullying would stop immediately, right? So you can't say, hey, I'm not the guy, I was just there, it wasn't really me. No, you can't do that, right? If these 2 guys were doing the wrong thing, and you're the third guy that got thrown in, we consider you as bad as the other 2.
I don't understand though. The Edom, the third person didn't testify.
He did.
Oh, he does. Yeah.
Yeah, he testified.
Okay.
But his testimony is unnecessary, right? That's the only point.
No, but he did testify.
But he did testify.
Right.
Yeah.
If he was just standing there and he went.
Correct. Yes. If he wasn't involved at all, he didn't, because they didn't do anything wrong, right?
That's what I wanted.
Thank you. Right. It's not exactly parallel by bullying cases, is what you're saying. Yes.
No. Yeah. No. Yeah.
So now al achas kama v'ksoi. So now the Gemara says, hey, but al achas kama v'kama sheishaim sachar al nitvalos mitzvah kosi mitzvah. How much more so should we understand that those people who are the side additional people to a mitzvah get credit for a mitzvah, because Hashem always rewards mitzvahs more than he punishes averos. So therefore, there's a kal v'chomer here. So therefore, let's say I'm the 11th guy at a minyan, and I go, oh man, they didn't even need me. No, you're the 11th guy for a minyan. So therefore, Hashem is going to reward you being the extra person as much as he would reward everybody who's part of the first 10 as well. Now there are other elements in here that when you're part of the, right, when you're one of the first 10 to arrive, then you get schar keneged kulam. You get schar. Maybe this extra person doesn't get schar keneged kulam. He only gets schar of equivalent to the other 10. I'm not sure how all of that works, but you can start doing your mathematical calculations of how much reward. But a person should never say, you know what, everybody they're collecting tzedakah, and all I can give is $5. I shouldn't bother. They don't really need my money. No, everybody's part of the mitzvah. Everybody participates. You're considered to be as in it as anybody else who gives significant amounts. Umash nayim nimtza echad mein karuv apostle edusun batela. So now let's go into the issue about them being relatives. Now let's say, just as if there were only 2 witnesses, if one of these 2 would be a relative or would be an invalid witness, we'd be left with only 1 witness, and therefore the testimony would be invalid. So too, now that we have a group of 3, if one of them happens to be a relative or an invalid witness, then the testimony is invalid, despite the fact that you still have 2 kosher witnesses. This is why it is common practice at weddings, right, that you call up 2 witnesses to be the witnesses on the ksuba, or 2 witnesses to be the witnesses of the of the Kedushin. Well, when everybody's watching, there's not enough witnesses. The answer is, yeah, but that's the problem. Half the people here are relatives of the chassan, and half of them are relatives of the kala. So if you just include everybody in the testimony, you're going to have this whole group of testimony, and they're going to invalidate the testimony. So therefore, you've got to call up witnesses to the exclusion of everybody else. Some people who are the leaders of Kedushin will actually say, you are the witnesses to the exclusion of everybody else, so that we are trying to be able to make sure that they're giving testimony, not the brother and the mother the father that's standing here or anybody else to ruin the witnesses.
So I have a question on that, because you're told not to, when there's some invalid weddings, like, a Jew marrying a non-Jew, you're not allowed to be present because you could be considered an aid. But according to the Gemara, there wouldn't be a problem, because first of all, as long as I'm not pulled to make individual testimony, I'm fine. And the Roiv are usually family members, and therefore there's no chashash of me being an aid anyways.
We'd have to look into the union a little bit more. Maybe I'll take a look at, maybe that'll be one of our WhatsApp potential questions about why that might be that you wouldn't be able to attend. I was always under the assumption that I wouldn't attend only because I wouldn't provide support for such a wedding, rather than being a witness necessarily, right? Even just coming means I find it acceptable, right? The fact that this wedding offends my sensibilities is the reason why I wouldn't come, rather than I'm worried that I might validate it because I'm a witness. If the marriage is invalid, right, me witnessing it doesn't make any difference.
Right. No, I had it with whatever Baltruvia.
Family members. Things, yes.
But that was one of the things that, or even if you saw Kohen, not like a Kohen marrying somebody,
right?
Like, I was just curious.
Okay, so now, what if there's even 100 witnesses, right? Now you got 100, you got a group. Let's say you have the whole crowd here at the chasana, right? And there's a brother there, right? So now the whole witnesses are all no good. Talmud Lomar, therefore the pasuk says, Eidim, right? And if you look on the side of the Torah, or he says the whole pasuk, Al Pishnayim Eidim, O Shlosha Eidim, for 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses, Yumas Emes, a person can be judged to death penalty. Lo Yumas Al Pi Eid Echad, he shouldn't be killed just for 1 witness. Now, the point though is that it's 2 witnesses, Shlosha, and then it says Eidim again, right? It could just say Al Pishnayim O Shlosha Eidim. It doesn't have to say Eidim and Eidim twice. So that extra word Eidim is there to tell me that no matter how many witnesses it is, 1 bad apple in the bunch ruins the whole thing. So you have to have a group of witnesses. So now, Amar Rabbi Yossi. So this is the rule. That's what we're saying. Rabbi Yossi says, Bamedvar Mamurim. Now, that's an important rule. But when is this rule apply? Bedini nefashos. That's only if you're dealing with life and death matters. The marriages do make a difference, because we said it could come to life and death, right? Because if she's married and then she has relations with somebody else, it could be a life and death issue. So it may make a difference. But this rule applies to life and death. Let's say simple enough, right? The witnesses witness the fellow violating Shabbos. So now it's a life and death case. So if one of the people who witnessed him violating Shabbos was his brother, so then he can't get a death penalty because he's part of the group of witnesses and he's saved. But when it comes to financial laws, it's different. Financial laws is different. You can have your brother standing there, right? Let's say you have a business partner. Your brother's your business partner. And then you have witnesses signing on the document, but your brother was there watching it. So you can exclude the brother from the group of witnesses. This rule of the invalid person only applies to capital cases. Rabbi says, no, I disagree with you. Does not make a difference whether you're talking about financial rules or capital cases. Now, ve'emasai. Now, when is this? Bizman shehasru bahen. That is only, in order to become a witness, right, you have to be included as a witness. One of the things that makes you a witness to a case is that you provided the warning, right? If you just happen to be standing there as a bystander and a murder occurred, you don't become an official witness. You're an official witness when you jump forward and says, hi, let me introduce myself. I'm a witness. I'm observing you killing this person, and therefore you're going to get a death sentence in Beis Din when I come and testify against you.
So you can't be called up as a witness? It's not like a Canadian court?
No.
Interesting.
Right? Witnesses have a mitzvah to come forward.
Right.
After the fact?
Yes. Well, after the fact. You can't
You're killing
Before
the
the fact.
Well, if you see someone's killing someone,
You
could
should try to
say
stop them, right? You should
Okay,
try,
you could
right?
say if you continue. Okay.
Right,
You
but
need
that's the
witnesses for chasra as well,
you need,
right?
the
For
witnesses
hasra
do
as
give the
well.
hasra. The witnesses
Witnesses
are the
do-
ones who
Oh,
give
it's
the
not somebody
hasra.
giving hasra and then somebody
Right,
witnessing.
correct. No,
Okay.
Someone has a sword, you can't necessarily stop him. You can give them a
correct.
warning.
You give them a
right? 'Cause you
warning.
don't
I
necessarily
am,
know your
but
own-
and your warning is formula. Is a formula. I am a witness to what you're about to do. If you do it, the court is going. And according to this, the question is, what needs to be included in the formula? If you say, "Don't do that, Basin will kill you," according to one person, that's a witness. That's a valid warning. According to another person, that's not a valid warning. You had better say that the penalty in court for killing somebody with a sword is that they're going to kill you with a sword, and therefore you should not do it. It's a capital offense. That's a warning, right? It all depends.
Just to get clarity on the warning, so if me and Josh are witnessing him doing something and I yell out, "Don't do it,"
Right.
that, and he's there as well. Both of us become witnesses. He doesn't have to yell out as well. He doesn't have to give hasra as well. It's just one person.
We're going to see what we talk about. It sounds like from this Gemara that you actually have to be one of the ones giving giving the warning. Meaning both of them have to give the warning. Yeah, because the way to remove this third person from the testimony group is if this relative did not give the warning. Right.
And for adultery, it's seclusion. That's the warning.
No. We're saying, we'll have to go there. But the answer is not necessarily. Right? There's a difference between seclusion, which is which when it comes to sota becomes relevant, but you have to actually know that the person committed the avera. Just the fact that they go into the room is circumstantial evidence. That's not sufficient to kill somebody, right?
No, that's why it's a sota, though.
That's a sota, right?
Right,
Because
yeah.
then Hashem's going to prove it by having to
Right,
drink the
to
water,
drink the-
right? But he's saying in a case where we've been testifying about adultery, right? What do they have to witness? The fact that a man and a woman go into a room together is not enough of a testimony to cause somebody to get a death penalty for adultery, right? You actually have to witness the act. Okay, so now.
So there's no such thing as eyewitness without saying something?
That is correct. I heard about it, or I saw it on a video camera. Does not count.
What if a witness is afraid of saying something because he thinks he's going to be killed by saying something?
Then that's where you get trouble, right? That's where lo saguru mipnei ish is probably the pasuk that would be applied to him. That a person should not be fearful of another human being, but nevertheless, yeah, that's exactly what wants to happen. Correct, and that's what happens. People don't come.
Killing someone and
Right.
he's screaming.
Correct, right.
So better to just witness it.
But then you won't be able to necessarily.
Yeah.
Then you won't have right.
You
That's
heard
why
the
death
schoolyard.
penalties were very uncommon.
Right. And make it
No, I have to make a comment here. We'll get to it through the Gemara later on. Death penalty is very uncommon. That doesn't mean that the person who killed somebody doesn't get other penalties, right? There's nothing prohibiting a court from throwing somebody in jail, for example, right? The Torah just says you can't kill somebody, you can't give somebody capital punishment, except under very specific circumstances.
Let me ask you something, and it was like a silly question, but what
Even the
is
Makoshesh Eitzim was put in jail before they knew what to do with him, right? That's what Pasuk says. They took the Makoshesh Eitzim, they didn't know what to do, so they put him in jail, and then they went to ask Hashem what to do, right? You can give somebody a life jail sentence for murder, right? You just can't kill him unless you follow all these protocols with these witnesses.
Do you
and
need
everything.
him to do this, to put somebody in
Not
jail?
necessarily, right? You could have the court theoretically could
have enough evidence?
do whatever they right if they decide that for whatever reason they decide that this guy. Remember, they can excommunicate people, right? And so once you do all kinds of stuff that you can do, right? You put somebody in, keep them in seclusion where they can't harm other people, right?
But the definition is different here because someone, like I said, someone could be an eyewitness, and it's not enough. He has to say something. But on the other hand, he could be an eyewitness and go to court and say.
That's what he has to do.
saw
Correct.
this.
That's
I
right.
saw
He has
this.
to do that. Correct.
So he's allowed to do that.
Who is?
The witness.
Is he allowed to? He's
I
obligated.
saw it.
Yeah.
I saw it.
Right, he's-
Without saying something to the.
It's
Oh,
in the
but he's
hasra-
saying
if the
did
hasra-
he
there's no
not give
hasra.
a yeah? So
There's no hasra.
we'll answer the questions about whether, let's say, for example, can you be a witness if you did not give the warning and those
Yeah.
sorts of things? I'm not sure. When we hopefully we get to the Gemara, this Gemara does not make it very clear, but it does specify that if somebody does not give a warning, they could be excluded from the witness group, right? Okay, now about bisman shelo hasr bahen, if the warning was not given, so then ma yasu shnei achim ve'echad shero ve'echad shehoreges hanefesh. Let's say two brothers are walking down the street, right, and they see somebody committing murder, and they want to witness it in order to be able to bring the guy to justice. Well, what are they supposed to do? The two of them are brothers with each other. They can't both be witnesses against this person. So therefore, one has to be the witness to be included and one not. So the way to be included is, you say, I'm a witness and I'm giving the warning. The other person says, I'm not a witness, I'm staying out of it. Therefore, when one guy doesn't give a warning and he stays out of it, he's excluding himself from the group of witnesses, and you can still hold the person accountable. Okay? So now, with all of those technicalities and everything, we can now see what the point of this argument, what was Ravina's point in this argument, right? What happened was that you have this circumstance where you've got some of the witnesses that the husband is bringing are relatives of each other. And here's the argument. Even though now you've got this group of witnesses, this argument that we have about whether a person can step out of it, is in it, but he can step out of it. So this is the argument, right? If according to if this relative is considered to be part of the group, so then this is going to be an invalid group of witnesses. In which case, the case before us of this adultery is only going to be a monetary case. Rabbi Meir says, get your three witnesses together.
What are considered Kroivim? I'm assuming immediate relatives, like
immediate relatives for sure.
Cousin wouldn't.
When we get later on, we'll discuss exactly all the relations. It's a little bit further than you might think, but yeah, right. You don't want to be able to have anybody who has a significant interest in your case. Okay, so now, but if the person who is the relative can be excluded from the other witnesses, well, then the fact that one of the witnesses is a relative doesn't matter, right? It's irrelevant. So therefore, you can still have a capital case with the remaining two witnesses according to the Chachamim.
This is after the Eidim have come already. Can one person then exclude himself?
That is correct. That's the issue. Now, because the witnesses are coming because they witnessed it. One of them happens to be a relative. So therefore, the question is, can we exclude him from the other two and still continue the case with the remaining two? That was the question that we had, and based on the answer to that, determines whether you need three judges for this case.
How about if they came in separately? How about if you have three witnesses or not in a group?
As long as the case is still going on, the witnesses don't actually all have to be physically present, but one has to continue to come one after the other. You can't have a witness testify today and then the court case ends and then tomorrow another witness comes.
No, my question is, if you have three separate witnesses and then you find out one is an Adam Zaman, right? Are the other two like? So I don't even know this guy. I'm just talking about what I saw. I don't know where this guy came from.
Let's hang on to all those kinds of questions because they're coming up. The Gemara is going to discuss them over the next few months. We will have all of those questions answered. Okay, now V'iboy Sema, another potential answer for this issue of 3 versus 23 judges is Kigon shehasru ba acherim velo hasru ba edim. What if the witnesses didn't provide the warning at all? What if it was the case as we were describing? What if somebody else is standing there and yells, "Hey, don't kill that person because you'll get Misa and based in and you're going to get..." And the two witnesses witnessed the warning, but they didn't themselves give the warning. The question is, do the witnesses themselves have to be the ones who give the warning, or do they just have to observe the fact that a warning was given? There's an argument between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbanan on that point as well. D'Tanan, we learned in a Mishnah, and we will see all of these Mishnayos in time in Makos. Rabbi Yossi says, "Liolam eno nerag achiu pishnei edov masrin bo." Rabbi Yossi says, the ones, this I guess answers the questions that we were just having, right? You are only a witness if the warning is only valid if the witnesses themselves are the ones who give the testimony. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, al pishnayim edim, on the testimony of the two witnesses. The Chachamim disagree. They interpret that pasuk differently. And they say a warning has to be given. It does not have to be the witnesses who give it. So as long as they can observe the warning, that would be sufficient.
And you need two people giving for sure. You need
two witnesses. You don't need two warnings.
Hasra, right.
Right? According to this, right? According to Rabbi Yossi, you need to have two witnesses who give two warnings.
Right.
Right? But according to the other opinion, you just need to have one warning witnessed by two witnesses. V'iboy Sema, another potential difference is Kegon dischachush bibdikos velo ischachush bechakiros. What happens is the witnesses come in and they have to ask the witnesses a bunch of questions to check to see if they're valid. The first round of questions are what we call bedikos. We're going to discuss this in greater detail. Bedikos is when we ask general questions regarding the circumstances around the event, right? So, for example, what shirt was the murderer wearing? What was the weather like that day? And the idea is to be able to provide setting to indicate that the person was really there. Then we have another type of question which is more directly involved with the crime. What was the murder weapon? Where did he stab him? Right? So then those are chakiros. There's an argument if the witnesses contradict each other in the first type of questions, but agree on the second part of questions, whether that testimony is still valid, right? Because they might mess up, like I wasn't paying attention. There was a guy stabbing another guy. They don't pay attention to what color his shirt was, right? But on the other hand, if you were there and you're a valid witness, that's what you have to make sure to be able to verify. So that's a question. That's an argument between Ben Zakkai and Rabbanan. Ditnan, we learned in the Mishnah. Maisa, there was a story, Ubadak Ben Zakkai be'uktzei te'enim, that Ben Zakkai, they were always trying to get people out of a capital murder case. So therefore, he asked him, the murder took place under a fig tree. And so he asked him about the types of stems on the figs in the fig tree, which was a very explicit detail and less relevant to the actual murder case, I guess anticipating and expecting that the witnesses would not be able to testify about it, and therefore absolving the case from being not absolving it, but preventing it from being a capital case, right? Which was the intent, right? We're going to see that courts try their best to not kill people, right? The goal is not, when it comes to capital cases, the goal is not justice. The goal is declaring that the person is not liable to a death penalty in order to receive repentance. Once the court specifies and says you can do tshuva without getting a death sentence, so that's good news, right? That's what the court is trying to do. I know it's a different from where
So they don't want MS necessarily.
That's correct. We're gonna have that. We're gonna see that the consistent theme is that the rule of judges when it comes to capital cases is that they are trying to find every technical leniency that you possibly can, right? The issue is, it's not, oh, well, we know you killed a person, so therefore we're going to kill you. The issue is, if we can find any technical leniency to indicate that you are not liable for a death sentence, right? Then we're not going. Then we will try our best not to kill you. Now, that being the case, that's not to say that we don't want truth. That's just to say that now that we have, as a court, determined that you're not liable to a death sentence, now you can do tshuva. Now you can bring a korban. Now you can do whatever other things you need to do in order to try to get repentance for the avera that you did, right? But death is only a consequence that is required under specific circumstances, and the court does its best to be able to indicate that this is not one of those specific
At
circumstances.
least it goes to civil court. You could go to jail. You could spend.
That's correct, and also we can.
Just the death sentence.
That's correct. The death sentence is the thing that the basin is trying to avoid as much as possible.
This is assuming that they already verified the time and everything of that.
Well, so this, according to this opinion, the bedikos actually were contradictory. That's the point. So here these witnesses come, and they, well, I take that back. What you said is absolutely right. They have to verify the time and the location. Because if you don't verify time and location, then you can't, then we call edus she'iev shar lahazima. It's a witness testimony that you cannot make into zomamim. And if that's the case, the testimony is invalid, because you always have to be able to have the ability to knock off these witnesses by proving, if the person says, it was either Tuesday or Wednesday, well then how are other witnesses going to come and verify that they're false, right? You have to be able to make sure that these witnesses pin down the right time, the right date.
That must have been hard back then, because the sun was at 45
Yeah,
degrees.
the Gemara is going to discuss that in Makos as well, right? How far off they could be, because they didn't have watches, so they had, obviously it could be off by a few hours and it would still be acceptable. Okay, so now, Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, Hevi abal edim shazinsa. Let's say the husband brings testimony that he brings witnesses that she was in fact an adulteress. Okay? Vehevi ha'av edim vehezimum. Now the father comes along and says, those witnesses were invalid. I have witnesses that proves that they were doing something else at the time that they're testifying that she was an adulteress. So now, and now they make the witnesses of the husband to be scheming witnesses. So the husband's witnesses are now going to get the death penalty, right? Because, so Eidei Habal Neharagin, the witnesses of the husband are going to get the death penalty because the punishment they were trying to give to her was a death sentence. However, Ve'in Misham and Mamon, but they don't have to pay for the money that they were trying to cause the woman to lose. Remember, the other thing that was going to happen if the husband was right is that she would get killed, but also the husband wouldn't have to pay the ksuba, right? So there's two punishments that should be going on here, because these witnesses caused a death sentence, but they also caused her to lose money from her ksuba. The answer is we don't have to worry about that. We have a concept called kamle b'derabba minei, that when somebody is liable for two punishments simultaneously, right, you only get the larger of the more significant of the punishment, not the lesser one. So therefore, on a technicality, these witnesses, since they're going to get a death penalty, they don't have to pay for the ksuba that they're also causing the woman to lose. They're only going to get the death penalty, not the financial penalty. Now, let's go on to what happens next. If the case continues, now the husband goes, whoa, wait a second. Your witnesses, he goes to the father, your witnesses are lying. My witnesses are really true. How do I know? I got another couple of witnesses, and they came and said that your witnesses were with them at the time that they're testifying about my witnesses. So they're claiming that they were with my witnesses on Tuesday. They weren't. They were with these other guys on Tuesday. So now my witnesses come and invalidate your witnesses. Okay, so now what happens? So so these two witnesses come and they make the father's witnesses invalid. So therefore, Edihav Nerogin, now the father's witnesses, they get the death sentence. Why? Because they were trying to cause death sentence to the husband's original witnesses. So they get that sentence. Umishalmin mamon, and they also have to pay. Why do they have to pay? Because the father's witnesses, if they were correct, would have caused the husband to have to pay 100 zuz, which is the secondary penalty of the fact that he was lying. Right? Now, 1 second. We just said that if you get the penalty, that you only get you only get the greater penalty. You can't get two penalties. So the answer is mamon lazeh unefashos lazeh. We have a new concept, and that is that even though the same witnesses are going to be liable to two punishments, if they committed two separate crimes, one against this person and one against a different person, they can be liable to pay for both. They are liable for the death sentence because they tried to kill these two witnesses, and they are liable for the financial penalty because they're trying to get the husband to pay.
Right.
But it's not against the same guy, so Kamle ben Ramine does not apply. Kamle ben Ramine only applies, you only get the more when it's the same person.
You mentioned that there's leniencies that the court takes on in order to exonerate someone, right?
Yes, as a generality. We're going to see when we get to it.
Does that
tomorrow.
also work for witnesses too, who have testified falsely?
Once they're in a death sentence penalty, once they're in a death penalty phase, yes.
Okay.
We're going to try our best to get a death penalty as much as we can, right? But you can't get everything, right? If you're going to hold these people responsible, so yeah.
The birth of the Jewish lawyer. Okay.
Vamar Rav Yosef. Okay, now Rav Yosef says, Ploni Rav Ol Onsohu. Somebody claims, he says, you know what, I was sexually assaulted by this guy, right? So now he's making that claim. So he can be one of the witnesses, even though he's the victim. Okay? Because why? Because the testimony is about the crime of the sexual assault against him. So therefore, there's no reason why he can't testify that the crime occurred. Okay, so he can be one of the witnesses. So as long as he has one witness and the victim himself can be the two witnesses in court. Okay? However, let's say the guy says liritzono. Let's say he says he was a willing participant, right, in the sodomy. Let's say he says, I'm a willing participant. So then, Rashahu, well, in that the case, the person's testifying about himself that he also did an Aveira. So if he's also testifying that he himself did the Aveira, Vator Amra Atashes Rasha aid, then he can't be a witness. Because the person who's doing a sin cannot be a witness. So he can't say, I participated in an Aveira and that guy should get a penalty. Right? So once you make the statement that you participated in the Aveira act, you can't be a witness against the other guy.
Is like the same idea. Why can't you apply it?
Why you're gonna ask why can't we apply the concept of
Pesha Aser
Pesha Hitir? Right. So
I'm admitting that I did it, and so did he.
Right, but it's the same act. Right? In all of those cases of Pesha Aser Pesha Hitir, you're saying the contract is valid, but here's the circumstances.
But can't you say
the entire statement could be true? Right. This guy is, if his entire statement is true, he cannot testify.
Right.
Right. His statement is true. You're right. We believe you. You're right. You did it. And now you're an invalid witness. So therefore, if you're an invalid witness, you can't testify against the other guy. He can't get sentenced for that crime. Rava Amar, Rava says, Adam Karov Eitzel Atzmo, Vein Adam Mesim Atzmo Russia. Rava says, actually, I like what Brian's saying. He says, that a person is his own relative. And a person cannot testify against his own relative. Therefore, when a person testifies and says, I did an Avera that he was involved in, so I would like to testify against my friend, right? The part where he implicates himself is stricken from the record, as you would like to say, right? Right? We call this palginan de dibure. We take his testimony and we cut it in half, right? The part where he testifies about himself is inadmissible because you're your own relative. That's inadmissible. But the part where he testifies about the other person committing the Avera, that he can testify about. So therefore, he, according to Rava, he can be one of the two witnesses.
But that's crazy that you can't, because if you apply that concept where you get rid of the first one, like I can say, I committed murder. But I can't because I'm now testifying against myself.
Correct. You cannot be your own witness against yourself. I committed murder, and this guy also was the witness. Now there's two of us, so therefore we're going to hold me responsible. No, cannot be. You cannot be your own witness in your murder case.
That's crazy.
Right? You cannot be your own. You can if you admit it. Right? We're going to see in all of these cases if you admit it, that's inadmissible.
Yeah, because you're your own relative. That's what you're.
You cannot testify. The biggest form of proof in a non-Jewish court is the admission of guilt, right? Mm-hmm. In the Jewish court, that is inadmissible. You cannot testify against yourself.
That's so interesting.
Good place to stop here. All right.
Sure. It'd be really bad if it stopped.